Hello, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me. um, it's going to be a few minutes while people are arriving. So we've got a poll here, which you'll be able to see. And I can see people already filling in, which is wonderful. If you could fill in the poll while we're waiting, we'll start once everybody's arrived. If someone could just pop in the chat to let me know that you can hear me okay, that would be really helpful. Loud and clear. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So we think we'll probably wait till just a couple of minutes after 2 to get started, to give people time to arrive. So I'll let you concentrate on the poll for a couple of minutes. Sarah, the answer to your question is yes, you're absolutely allowed to fill in more than one poll. If you can, I don't even know if that's possible, but if it lets you, then yes, fill in one for each of your different hats. Oh, it won't let you submit page 4. Have other people submitted? I'm not quite sure. If it doesn't let you submit, don't worry, Katie. It looks like it's registering the answers anyway, so I wouldn't worry too much. Yeah. So I think, yes, we think there might be a bit of an issue with the poll not actually letting you do the last bit, but the fact that we can see what people's answers are in here, I think means that we don't need to worry. We'll wait till a couple of minutes past and then I'll complete it so that we can see. So for those that are just arriving, welcome. We're waiting till just a couple of minutes past, so that make sure we've got everybody in the room before we kick off. But while you're waiting, please could you just kind of fill in the poll that we've got there, and don't worry about the bit if it doesn't let you end at the end. We think it's still working. Okay, just 1 or 2 more minutes to fill in the poll whilst we wait for anybody else that's going to join us, and then we'll kick off. Okay. I can still see 1 or 2 people joining. So for those that have just joined, please could you just fill in the poll that you can see on the screen, and then we'll kick off in just a minute. Yes, sorry, there's a bit of an issue with the poll ending. I'm going to end the poll in a minute, and then hopefully everything should be fine and we should return to a normal screen. So there just seems to be a bit of an issue for finishing the poll, but don't worry about that. Okay. Right, I think that's everybody that's going to join us is probably now with us. So if you have just joined and you haven't had a chance to fill in the poll, do that whilst I'm speaking. But basically, a huge welcome to everybody, and thank you ever so much for choosing to join this workshop on enabling and supporting volunteering. I'm Wendy Lansdowne, and I'm one of the place coordinators that Adrian mentioned this morning, and my area is East Cambridgeshire. I've got two colleagues very kindly doing the tech today with me, which is Agnes Toth, who's our Time Currencies Officer, and also Anita Howard, who is the South Cams Place Coordinator. So very much welcome to you all. As has been said a couple of times today, this is a really new way of doing things for all of us and gives us a slight sense of trepidation. So please be patient with us in case there are any issues. We very much hope it will go smoothly, and I'm sure we will sort any glitches out, but forgive us any minor errors. So just to kind of give you an overview, this is very much not a talk and talk session. It's much more about us sharing experiences. There's been so many different ones during COVID. The sharing during this session is mainly going to be through an hour's film, or just under an hour's film, which we'll set off in a minute. It's not quite as swish as the beautiful films that we saw this morning, but a lot of the content is actually quite similar. It's about different organisations sharing their experiences during COVID. So that'll be the main thing. So it would be the hours film with the different experiences. Please, during that, do use the chat box to share. I think it's been quite nice this morning. We've seen some really nice interactions during that. And then after that session, we'll have a panel come together to do Q&A, and some of those people are people who are actually in the audience now. So you'll be welcomed into the Q&A panel after the film, and we'll ask you at that point to turn on your mics and camera so that you can be seen. So at that point, I will now have a go at ending this poll, and hopefully that will bring you all back. So we'll close that. I'm hoping now that you'll be able to see me on the main screen. That's good. We'll have a look at the results afterwards, and at this point I'm going to start the film so that you can see that, and we can come together at the end to share reflections, ask questions and discuss. Thank you.
Pandemic, but with the collaboration of the
there was WhatsApp groups being set up, there were street champions, there was lots of neighbourly activity, and people finding all sorts of ways to deliver essential supplies, medication, and companionship. In this workshop today, we want to celebrate and learn from those experiences. We're going to do that by kicking off with some reflections from Chris from Support Cambridgeshire, and then we'll go on to 4 interviews with different organisations, which give a flavour of the wide variety of amazing community responses that have happened, from informal and hyper-local to more formal and more structured, all of them brilliant and involving parish councils. So please do enjoy this film, and during it, take the time to join in the chat with your comments and reflections from your own experience, and then we'll come together at the end to discuss. Thank you. And now I'd like to welcome Chris Trevorrow from Support Cambridgeshire, who's going to share some reflections on some really great practice she's seen from parish councils across the county during the pandemic.
Thanks, Wendy. So we've been, obviously it's all been really impressive, the amount of volunteering that's taken place during the lockdown, and people have really stepped up and helped their communities. And parish councils are no exception to that. We've seen parish councils encouraging people through their informal volunteering. We've seen them facilitate collaboration between businesses and local community groups to help people. And we're also starting to see them leading the way, really, in bringing communities back into activity. So I'm just really going to cover those sorts of areas, just reflect on those really, if I may. So with the informal groups, we were all absolutely astonished, weren't we, with the speed at which they appeared literally overnight, certainly over a weekend, and the mutual aid movement kicked off. One of the examples of that was Bluebell 19, which is out near its way. They cover 5 villages, and they were literally up and running within a few days of lockdown. They used their existing online forum that the villagers had to recruit people, and they also used leaflets and posters and that kind of thing. So the volunteers respond very much as lots of these mutual aid groups have done. They respond to an email, a call out, really, a call to action, and they do all the things that these groups have been doing such a fantastic job doing, picking up prescriptions, shopping, that kind of thing. So although it wasn't a parish council initiative, it is something the parish councils have been supporting, and I know that as individuals they've been participating as volunteers. So what volunteering for Bluebell 19 and other informal groups have in common is that they are responsive and agile with very little red tape. And the volunteering that they've been offering has been very flexible and obviously, in this particular case, but hyper-local. And the feedback people get is instant. So they instantly know that they've spent their time well, that the person that they've delivered the shopping to, etc., is really grateful and pleased to have it. So they're making a difference to someone, and they get that feedback really quickly. And these are the key things that make volunteering satisfying for people, that we see throughout all volunteering. So it's interesting that actually looking at these mutual aid groups has got us back to basics. What is it that people really, why do they get involved in volunteering, and why do they continue? So with these informal groups, one of the things that perhaps they didn't initially address was how they keep everyone safe. And there has been a balancing act in putting health and safety and safeguarding in place without losing all the benefits of that informality. So it has been quite a tricky act, and that's another place that we've seen parish councils try and help these groups with support, and something that we've been trying to do in Support Cambridgeshire as well. Where there weren't these groups, and not all communities were able to generate that level of volunteering, the parish councils have been involved in pointing, signposting people to support and help. So, and local health centres, people like that have been very active, making sure that people have their prescriptions delivered, that kind of thing. We've got some groups like FACT out in Fenland Area Community Transport, who have, the word of the pandemic is probably pivoted. So they pivoted to deliver shopping as opposed to ferrying people around, which is what they normally do and what they've gone back to. But they did an amazing job delivering hundreds of bags of shopping. And I think you're going to talk, Wendy, later to Care Network, who also did a fabulous job helping lots of communities. The sort of second thing I pointed out that parish councils did was about collaboration. So they really sort of encouraged businesses and other community groups to get together and use their resources and their skills to help local people. So in Burwell District Day Centre, for example, although unable to operate as a day centre, continued to deliver Meals on Wheels, and also instigated a telephone help service as well. The council also in Burwell supported Action for Youth, who worked alongside the local co-op to deliver activity packs to young people in the village, you know, at a time where they really needed that kind of thing with being off school. And Burwell Help Group, which is the grassroots group that is supporting people through COVID, are being assisted by the local co-op, the churches, and the Burwell Bike Group. So that's a big club, in fact. So there's a really nice mixture of collaboration happening, which is something that the parish council is very much behind. Parish councils now have an ongoing role in not only carrying on doing all of that, but also in encouraging community volunteer groups to start opening up again and start meeting where it's safe to do so. So, for example, I was talking to Little Granston Parish Council, who are looking into starting to meet face to face in a COVID secure way in their village hall, because they want to encourage other people and other groups to start meeting in the hall. Because all our facilities and our groups, they're not collecting subs, they're not getting rent, all these things. So priority is to keep people safe, but we also want the groups to carry on existing and meeting, and also we need people in the community to be able to meet up safely and still benefit from or reduce their social isolation and have that general well-being that they get from meeting up. Burwell Parish Council haven't been charging local teams for use of their ground because they wanted to encourage them to get out there and use it. And it's probably true of all parish councils who've opened up their play equipment. But I mean, the example they gave me was that it's actually taking them an hour and a half every day to sanitize that play equipment to make sure that it's safe for use. So there's a lot of real effort going into opening up their community and getting people out and about and meeting each other safely. So I think that's really what I just wanted to feed back. It's just quietly going on, and it's just a fantastic effort, and we'd just like to recognise it and thank you very much for all that you do.
Thank you so much. That's incredibly helpful and really helps us set the scene for the conversations which we're going to have now. So we're going to go over now and actually talk directly to some of the groups that have been involved during the pandemic. So the first group we're going to speak to is the Village Hall Committee from Coveney, and with us from that committee we have Shona Mackenzie and Ellie Senior. So the first question I have for you is just what did you do during the pandemic?
We straight away felt, because we managed the village hall, which is the only amenity in the village, that we needed to be there to bring the community together even while we couldn't actually get together. And so we went for a really simple approach, but a way of trying to link people together in the neighbourhood, really. We started off just thinking about how to communicate with people, and we had sort of two strands to that approach. One was to put stuff online, and we already had a Facebook page for the village hall, so we used that. But we were also very conscious that obviously a lot of the people who are likely to be most vulnerable perhaps wouldn't have contact in that way. So we also drew up a flyer which was put in our parish magazine, but also which we went round door to door delivering. And that was aimed at really communicating two things. One is to try and attract volunteers and say to people, you know, we need to be neighbourly during this time. If you're able to help in any way at all, get in contact with us. And then also to reach out to people who were feeling vulnerable in any way and say to people, you know, whatever your problem or issue is as a result of COVID, you know, get in touch with us and we'll do what we can to help. And we were keen as well that nobody would feel that wasn't meant for them. I think a lot of the support was aimed obviously at, you know, older people or people who already had some sort of difficulties, but actually we were conscious that there might be just ordinary people out there who in a normal world could just cope by themselves, but for whatever reason had something that they needed support with. So we wanted the flyers to appeal to those sorts of people as well. So our initial communication had a good response from people volunteering, and we built up a database of about 30 people across the three villages of Coveney, Wardy Hill and Wayhead. And I took their details, basically, just phone numbers and email addresses with their permission. And then when someone would get in touch to ask for whatever form of support, our aim was to pair them up with the person that was closest to them location wise, who was able to help. And we wanted to try and form relationships between those pairings so that as the sort of organisation, we could then step away and just leave them to support one another, you know, in a neighbourly way. And that was to make it feel friendly for both parties, and also to make sure that the support we were setting up would last for, you know, indefinitely, for however long they needed to. And also so that the person that was asking for help wouldn't have to be constantly explaining themselves and having to get in contact all the time, because people don't enjoy doing that, do they? They don't like asking for help. So, you know, we thought if we can pair someone up with someone who can support them long term, then they can get to know each other and get to know each other's needs, and just then carry that on between themselves. So that was our approach to it, really.
Lovely. Thank you. And what did you learn during the experience?
Yeah, there are a few things that were sort of that I wouldn't have thought of before it happened, I suppose. The first one I suppose I did know is that we live in a really supportive village, actually, and that there weren't lots and lots of people that needed support, because in many cases, you know, if someone knew that they were living next door to someone elderly or someone who needed to shield, then they went and knocked on the door anyway. And we didn't need to be part of that. You know, that was going on all over the place, and that's fantastic. And that's exactly the sort of village we think we live in. And it proved that it's true. We do. Coveney is a friendly place to live. So that was really great. But the message out of that as well was that we couldn't assume that was the case. You know, there are lots of people who get very involved in the things that we run at the village hall generally, but there are also people living in the village who choose not to be part of those things because they prefer to keep themselves to themselves, or that's not their sort of thing. And that doesn't mean that they don't deserve our support just as much. So I was really keen to make sure that those people didn't slip through the gaps or feel that they couldn't ask for help just because they didn't know the people that are on the village hall committee, or, you know, aren't part of that clique. I didn't want that to be a feeling for anybody. So I thought that it was really important for us to make sure that we kept communicating. So we did numerous flyer drops throughout the sort of lockdown period, aimed at slightly different demographics each time, to make sure that everybody knew that if they needed some help, they could ask, and it didn't matter if you didn't know people locally. So that was really important. The second thing that I realised quite early on is that people don't really like to feel vulnerable, and they don't feel that they want to ask for help, but people do love to give, and they love to be able to give help. And so often what I found is that someone would get in touch with me, and in the first instance they'd be offering to be a volunteer, and then as I talked to them a little bit more, it would come to light that actually they were struggling themselves in some way. An example is there was a young mum who lives a bit further up the road from me, and I knew her a bit already, and she'd said, oh, you know, I'd like to volunteer. And then a few texts started coming through saying, oh, you know, it's really hard to get milk, isn't it? Oh, I'm really struggling to get the supermarket. And actually it transpired that she was really worried because she wasn't able to get enough milk for her child who was still under 1, and that was really important to her. And she hadn't felt that she could come to me straight away and ask for that. But in volunteering her time, she felt that she could then bring that up. And so I was then able to get someone to go and get some milk for her. Or, you know, someone had some milk in their freezer and brought it round for her so that she had it that day. So I think a lot of times I realised that when people volunteer, you've got to make sure that they don't need help themselves as well. You know, there's not a clear-cut line between those people that are helping and those people that need help. They're often the same people. So it was just kind of making sure that I asked the right questions and was open to listening to what people might need, even if at the first instance they seemed very capable. And then the last thing that message that I sort of got out of it was that it's all about mental health. And I think we've all discovered this, haven't we, through the COVID kind of times, is that people's perception of this crisis has been just as important to look after as their actual experience of it, if you like. So, you know, I think in a village like Coveney, we're quite rural here. And so during the lockdown, you know, the positive of that is that we've got lots of space and we didn't feel, you know, like we were on top of each other. But the downside was that we didn't see much of the world. And so I think it was very easy for people to feel quite cut off. and perhaps the only communication they were getting from the outside world was through the media, and of course the news that was coming through the media was generally quite, you know, low and worrying. And so I felt that it was really important for us to try and make people feel positive and make people feel that it's okay, you know, that you're part of a great village here and that we're here looking after each other, and, you know, give them kind of good news stories, if you like. And so I did that in a few different ways. The most simple way was that just to make sure that when we're out and about, or when people were walking past my house, that we just made sure we gave everyone a wave, a smile, opened the window to say hello. And then equally, you know, when I was out for my daily walk, you know, making sure that I was sort of looking in the windows just to sort of keep an eye on, you know, do people seem happy? Is, you know, does everything look like I'd expect it to look? Or has that house been, you know, a bit shut up for a few days and perhaps that person needs a knock on the door just to check they're okay? And another thing is that we have a parish magazine locally. So I worked closely with the editor of the magazine to make sure that we had, you know, hopefully interesting stories in the magazine each month that weren't necessarily going on about COVID all the time. So, you know, I tried to put in June, for example, ordinarily as a village hall, we'd have been running a family sports day event, which we of course couldn't do, but we put an article into the magazine of ideas of how you could run your own family sports day at home, and encourage people to send in photos of stuff that they've been up to at home. We did an article about home, you know, some ideas for homeschooling to help families that were at home with their kids, you know, have some ideas of things to do. We've got a Pilates teacher in one of the villages, and she wrote an article about some Pilates stretches that you could try at home. So just trying to get loads of really positive, good news stories out there, to make people feel that the whole world hadn't fallen apart.
Thank you so much. Some wonderful examples there. The final question I have for you is, what do you see for the future for Coveney?
Well, we talked a lot about how we can continue the support that we've been offering, because it's been great to know that if there are people in our village who need help, they've got a number they can call. And so we want to continue that indefinitely. So we talked a lot about how to do that. And in fact, I talked to you, Wendy, and you were really helpful about exploring options like the time bank. But in the end, we concluded that for a village of our size and our situation currently, that wasn't the right fit for us. So we've decided just to go for continuing the sort of informal approach that we've got. So every month in the parish magazine, we continue to have this sort of advert with my details on there, so that if people need any help, they know they can get in touch. And we continue to put that on flyers when we put flyers out too, so that support is always there. But over the last few months, there haven't been any requests for support, and that's great news, I think, really, because hopefully that means that the pairings we've set up are working. And also, I think generally people have sorted out their support networks in lots of instances. You know, they've got their supermarket slot now, and, you know, getting medication has been sorted out and that sort of thing. So that need for now has lulled. But what we've put our energy into instead is the events that we would have been running as a village hall. We feel are still important to try and do something like that, even if we can't do what they might have looked like before. So our whole approach is to try and look for ways to say, yes, that's how we can do this, rather than, no, that's a bit too scary, we're not sure how to do it, so we won't try. So although our events look very different to how they looked last year, we've been eager to make sure that they continue, because, you know, COVID has created very isolating times for people, and we wanted to look for ways that we can bring our community together, even if we can't actually be close together in the way that we would have been done before.
That's fantastic. I was just wondering if I could ask Shona to say a little bit about the events that you have planned.
Yes, so like Ellie said, during the summer, you know, we had to look at how we could continue to bring the community together. We're very fortunate that Coveney is a small village, including Wardy Hill and Wayhead, but it's also a really supportive village as well as a small village. So, you know, most people know people. And so there is that real old-fashioned community feel about it, which I think is vitally important. And that's really grown in strength, certainly since March, when, you know, we were all under restrictions and everybody just sort of came into their own then, and people looked out for each other. And I think that's been one of Coveney's strengths ever since I've lived in the village. So like Ellie said, it was really important that we didn't just abandon everything that we'd planned to do as a village hall committee. And we'd had some really successful events that ran last year, and we were looking to replicate those this year, however, under a slightly different sort of format. So, for example, we would normally have a large sports day. Like Ellie said, we looked at smaller, you know, sporting events within people's back gardens, for example. We would have a big fete within the village in conjunction with the church. And rather than just abandon those for a year, we thought, okay, then let's try and let's look at a risk assessment, and we set up a series of mini fetes during August. So there's one run every Sunday during the month of August on a much, much smaller scale, obviously. And we had different themes for those fetes. So one week it was like, you know, a book stall, and we'd have a children's tombola and raffle tickets and things like that. So it's just like a fete, but shrunk right down. And we had a plant stall, and that was great. So people, and actually I think Coveney is quite a respectful, well-mannered village as well. So people, when they came, would just naturally social distance. So, you know, people were courteous in that they'd step back until someone had bought what they needed to buy from the stall and move on. And it was held by the pond, which is quite a large area. So people were still there chatting, but from a social distancing point of view. And then we then had the advantage of people, because the weather was glorious in August, biking through the village. So, which is quite unusual for Coveney, but people passing through would stop and also maybe buy things from the stall, which was lovely. But it was another way of getting the community together, and it ran over 2 or 3 hours, so people could just sort of pop in and speak to you know, to the members of the community, or maybe sit by the pond and chat to someone from a, you know, in a social distancing way. You know, autumn fast approaching, we thought, you know, bonfire night, firework night, again, really successful in Coveney, considering it's such a small village, and greatly supported financially through our parish council. And we thought, again, we didn't want to just say, well, actually, we'll put it on hold until next year. So through our committee meetings, looked at risk assessments, etc., and came up with the idea of having mini sparklers. So a little bit like the Clap for Heroes, at a specific time on bonfire night, people will come out with the sparklers. So again, it's a nice way of bringing the community together. Planning Christmas events, so with the tree and the children in the village, where they would normally hold on to an animal from the crib and take it up on Christingle. We thought, what else can we do? How else can we bring the village together and bring, you know, the young people of the village together? So they could decorate a bauble and hang their own bauble on the tree. So risk assessments we looked at, put in place. It's all done in a safe way, we would hope. But again, as I say, I think the residents of Coveney are quite respectful of that, and you know, want to support these events within the village. So yes, so as long as COVID's here, we will continue to plan in probably a slightly different way, but who knows, that might be the norm in the future. But I would certainly say to any groups or committees or parishes out there not to put things on hold, but, you know, let's share good practice, let's share good ideas throughout the district, because I'm sure there's lots going on that we've not thought of. And again, just share those good processes that we can all work together and just strengthen our community, really.
Wonderful. Thank you both. Some amazing examples and inspiration there. That's wonderful. Is there anything final you'll want to share, or is that everything?
No, I think just to say thank you to you as well, actually, Wendy, because the way that you've brought the different groups together, you know, like Shona was saying, sharing good practice between different groups has been really valuable. So even just those little ideas that you think, oh yeah, why didn't we think of that? It's been really great to have a platform to share those.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you both very, very much.
Thanks, Wendy.
Thank you.
And next we're going to speak to Anita Howard, who is part of the coordinating team at Fordham Time Bank, and she's also a colleague at the County Council within the Think Communities team. So first question, Anita, is to tell us a bit about what you did during the pandemic with Fordham Time Bank.
So I was a little bit late joining the party. The initial meetings happened right when the announcements first started that lockdown was going to come in place, and there was a team of remarkable people led by Scylla Palmer, who is a huge community champion and well known and loved within Fordham. And they very quickly recognised there was a need to do something to support the community locally. I came around through some mutual connections to offer my help because of my role within the county council. You know, I knew I had a good feeling of what was needed, and maybe had some skills that I could share. So in Fordham, we very much started off with a helpline. So what we enjoyed calling the burner phone was purchased, and a telephone number to make sure it was something that could easily be passed around the village, and a team of volunteers could man that phone line. We sent out around 1,500 little postcards to all the residents of Fordham to just say, get in contact if you need any help. So that was the main thing. We were doing shopping, prescription pickups, errands, that sort of thing. So the basic. But what was really interesting, and what really sparked my kind of passion to what was happening in the community, was all the other side projects that came out. So we had a little impromptu food bank, which was, you know, pretty critical to some families within the village, some families that wouldn't normally be accessing food bank support. We connected with our food share and lots of other organisations to make sure that we were getting surplus food that we could distribute around the village as well. So that was really good. We had huge amounts of donations from local businesses, and I think this is more around the mental health side of things. You know, we were able to distribute a load of chocolate to key workers. All the Easter chocolate that Scottsdale's had were donated, and we were able to distribute that out. And it was great because, you know, we had around, I think it was about, God, it must have been about 100 volunteers join, and it was giving them stuff to do as well that made people feel connected. So those sorts of deliveries of chocolate, I mean, who doesn't love handing someone a piece of chocolate? That was really great. But yeah, we did some work around VE Day, which helped bring different parts of the community together in a very, you know, different way to normal. It wasn't like having a big social event. It was about how do we connect people at a distance. So it's things like bunting around the village, so the village felt connected, and you know, everyone had the same sort of idea around that. We had a community paper round, which helped people that didn't necessarily have access to the internet to stay connected, and certainly the Shielding residents in the village, that meant they had that connection and that conversation on the doorstep as well that perhaps was really missing. We had a team of fantastic seam mistresses making face masks. So we had free face masks for anyone that needed it within the village, which I think came in brilliantly. We also did a phone buddy scheme. So there was a recognition of some of the skills within the village where people had a background in counselling or support in some form or another. And they were able to help our most lonely members of the community by just having that friendly phone call. You know, it was very light touch. It was, you know, just someone to call and someone to speak to. And I think that made a huge impact on a lot of people. And what was fantastic was all the side projects that came along, the children that were growing sunflowers to be distributed around the village, the colouring competitions that came from local businesses. You know, there was a lot of little side things that came over. We were ever so lucky in that we were able to have a hub space at the British Legion Club, and every day we would have a table out the front that would have loads of goodies and gifts and activities and all sorts of things, so that when people were doing their one piece of exercise every day could run past the British Legion, they could walk their dog past the Legion, they could take their children for a little wander there, and they could pick up something interesting, they could have a conversation with either Scylla or I or whoever was around, and you know, just have that connection. And I think that was probably the most important thing we did, aside from making sure people had access to food and medication, was we were a central point within the village. And that was hugely connected to the parish council as well. We were able to, I had lovely Jill, would pop in almost daily to make sure, you know, everything was going well. And, you know, she was a key part of the volunteering team as well. So yeah, it was all about that connection and what that hub provided.
Brilliant, thank you, Anita. Some amazing examples there. Can you tell us a bit about your learning during the experience?
So I think the biggest learning was that, one, we needed to be quite careful about how we distributed work amongst all the different volunteers. As I mentioned, we had quite a large number of volunteers, and we strayed away from the traditional time banking mechanisms, purely and simply because we needed something that was a bit more instant. So we utilised volunteer rotas. So we would categorise the different tasks. So maybe one's being on the helpline, one would be doing the shop, one would be picking up prescription, you know, those sorts of things, running errands. And then each, we would just split it into shifts. So a volunteer would only do Monday morning, for example, and they would do Monday morning on the phone. And it would mean that everyone could get involved and we weren't putting too much pressure on one particular volunteer. I mean, saying that, we had some volunteers that wanted to do everything all of the time, and that was brilliant, and there was no such thing as volunteer fatigue there. But I think that was something that was very strong, that Scylla set up, that really made a difference to how people felt involved in volunteering. I think that was a key part. And the other thing is, again, a little bit of using my my day job, if you like. I had a lot of information flowing through the local councils, the county and the district council, and having that information being filtered directly to a community group made such a difference. You know, we were able to contribute to different bits of research, things like the directory, which could, you know, mean that people outside of the area could get support for relatives inside the area. There was all that sort of thing that we could stay really connected with and understand what was going on as things was happening. So that was big learning points for me, those two areas.
Brilliant, thank you. And final question is, if you had a crystal ball, how would you see the future for Fordham?
So I think there's a lot that's made a difference within Fordham. I think there are bigger connections. It takes me a lot longer to walk my dogs around the village than it did before, because I know so many more people and I can stop and chat and things like that. And I think that's something that's reflected with quite a few people that were involved with this particular project. I wouldn't say I was necessarily the typical person to volunteer into a local community group, but found it was a very accessible way to do it. I could see the need, I could see, you know, how I could help, how I could contribute. And I think that is the case for a lot of other people within the village. They are going to be much more able to get involved now. And I think it's also helped a lot of people to see that it doesn't have to be formally, you know, doing something for the village. Some of the little projects that came out of it, like the sunflowers around the village, that needed very little organisation. It was just someone's idea and everyone got on board. And I think it's that's really changed. So I think if we need to set up something to help people in the same sort of light again, I know that it could be set up incredibly quickly. We would have a huge amount of volunteers. We might have to change the times that we do things. You know, not everyone's going to have so much spare time during the day or during weekdays, but evenings and weekends, I think, are still, you know, an opportunity for us. So yeah, I think it really has changed how Fordham has kind of gelled a bit. Yeah, I like to think there's going to be lots more projects coming off the back of this one.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your experience.
Thank you.
Next, I would like to introduce Lynette Harron, who works for Care Network as their Deputy Chief Executive Officer. Care Network cover Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and they're a charity that put people at the heart of everything they do. So over to you, Lynette.
Lovely. Well, just going to talk a little bit about what we did and what our volunteers did really through the lockdown period and beyond. So initially, we had to stop our volunteers going out to provide face-to-face support. An awful lot of our volunteers were actually in the shielded category in any case, and so wouldn't have been able to safely go out to support anybody else in the community. It was too much of a risk to themselves and other people. But what we were able to do was redeploy those volunteers to a check and chat service. So that was to provide support for people across the whole of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. People who had, they were suffering adverse well-being issues due to the lockdown period. They were frightened, they couldn't go out to the shops on their own. And so we made a lot of connections with volunteers and staff with clients across the whole of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. And we managed to support through that lockdown period over 180 people in that way. And we found that that not only was beneficial to the people that we were able to support, but also to the volunteers, because they still wanted to volunteer and they still wanted to give something back, but they couldn't physically themselves go out to provide that support. So they were able to do that in a different way. So we've made some really lovely connections in that way. And hopefully those volunteers will be able to meet those clients at some point in the future when things return back to more of a normal. But we also recognised really early on that there was a huge amount of volunteer activity in communities with time banks and various different new initiatives, neighbourhood groups popping up to support their community. And we felt really strongly that we should support that work because that is what was going to sustain people through that lockdown period. So we undertook a huge piece of research very early on and kept that up to date throughout the whole period of different groups that had set up, what they were and weren't able to support with, how we could connect our clients in with that support at a really local level, and also to provide an escalation point for those voluntary groups to be able to pass their people that they were supporting who perhaps had more complex issues than they were used to or able to support, so that they could pass them to us and we could take that forward for them. We're still supporting that work in communities, still connecting with all of those local groups, and we feel that it's really important to try and keep that going as much as possible. So yeah, that was really nice. And then with our volunteers, we just kept in contact with them the whole time. Newsletters every week to begin with, then every fortnight, telephone calls, emails. And as we come out of the various stages and new opportunities come up for the volunteers, it's making sure that they know they're available to them, and so they can get involved in as many different ways as they want. To begin with, because we are an organisation who exist to support communities and we are volunteer led and we all feel very passionately about it, and that's why we work in the voluntary sector, that's why we work for charities, and that's why we volunteer, and I volunteer personally myself, because you want to do something that makes a difference. And so I think what we learned initially was that there is space for everybody who wants to make a difference. And just because you previously did things in one way and you can no longer do it in that way, there's always space to do something else. And there's also a time to step back and let communities step forward. So by doing that, we were able to develop our new service beginning with the check and chat service, just to make sure people's mental health and well-being was well through the lockdown period. And then moving further on to hopefully accompanying people out to the shops or back to their visits to groups or for walks in general in the community, just to enhance people's confidence. So yeah, I think that's what we learned, was that there's always space for everybody in every community to be able to support.
Brilliant. And how would you see the future? What's in the future for Care Network?
In the future for Care Network is we, dependent on the restrictions, the regulations at any given point in time, we are ready to fully expand again back out into the communities. We are ready to draw that back in and support people more remotely again. But we have a new project called Project Catalyst that works really hand in hand with our other services, so Help at Home, Community Navigators and our wider community development teams. And that is to help build confidence back out in the community. So I think whilst it's very important that we maintain the regulations and that we follow the regulations, and they're there for a reason, they are important, that we also make sure that if people are able to and want to go out and reconnect, that they can do that. So Project Catalyst does that through initially matching volunteers with clients on the telephone, so check and chat support, and then pulling that through further forward to Trusted Friend, which is ideally the same volunteer connecting with that client and walking with them to their first trip to the shop, walking with them to their first visit to a safe, COVID-safe group, socially distanced and all, you know, within the regulations, and just building their confidence to let them know that they can do that. This is how to do it. Don't be frightened of the fact that the local co-op has got arrows and somebody might shout at you if you go the wrong way down the aisle. That's fine. We'll come with you and we'll handle that with you for your first few visits, and just to acclimatise people to it. So that's what we are focusing on doing, client-facing work in the near future, over winter, I would imagine, depending on restrictions and regulations. And we also have small pots of funding available to help groups across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough to be able to set up new innovative ways of meeting. So we recognised that through the lockdown period, there were a lot of groups who sprang up out of nowhere. And we really think it was important to keep those going as safely as we can. So we applied to the National Lottery and we got some funding, some small grant funding, along with other pots of funding from the local CCG and Independent Age, to be able to award small amounts of £200, £250 to small groups to safely set up. So it could be about making sure they're in a COVID-safe premises, or making sure that they have the adequate PPE that they need, or even to help facilitate Zoom licenses. We have a Peterborough Lithuanian group set up to support each other with their well-being, and it's all on Zoom. So it's entirely COVID safe. So we're hoping to do more of that to help communities really continue to support each other and to allow groups to continue to support each other, even though people can't come together face to face.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Lynette. And I think you're likely to have sparked some people's imagination with this, and people will be keen to find out more. If it's okay with you, we can include some of your information in the pack that people can download at the end. Is that okay?
That would be wonderful. We are always happy to have volunteers, and we have a real need at the moment for those Project Catalyst volunteers in Check and Chat and Trusted Friends.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Wendy.
Okay, and next we have Councillor Yvonne Murray from Histon and Impington Parish Council, and she's going to share a little of their experience there. So Yvonne, can you tell me first what you did? So yeah, what happened in Histon and Impington during COVID?
Okay, so hi Wendy, hi everyone. So we really started work on this in a very small way, in that we received a number of signs from the South Cambs District Council, and we went round all of our businesses in the High Street and in the wider village to make sure they put these signs up. And they looked at me with dread, really, to say, really, you know, this isn't what we want to be doing. But it was amazing. Within 2 or 3 days, they were all proudly displayed in the windows. And under our current chairmanship, we've been looking at how we collaborate more with our residents and our businesses. So what we did was we got in touch with the church very early on, early in March, and we decided to come together and bring together the key groups. So that's all of the Churches Together movement, the parish council, and one of our major charities, which is High Friends. So on the 12th of March, we brought these groups together and decided what we should do. And we started to formulate the strategy very early on. And we had a sort of pyramid, and the pyramid was steering group, street coordinators, and then volunteers. And then on the 27th of March, we got our first volunteer meeting, which was over 80 people. And so at that point, we were starting to develop the street coordinator network. And by the end of March, we've got 89 street coordinators covering our 130 odd streets. What we'd also done is we'd also were mindful that we wanted support to be accessible to everyone in the village. So our local litter pickers have a very well coordinated scheme to deliver to all of the villages. They were supported by our local post office, who did that who agreed to deliver for free. And we delivered leaflets to our 3,488 households to say we were here. And then the street coordinators began to develop WhatsApp group, Facebook groups, talking over people's fences so that the support could be initiated by the people. And we were very mindful and led by Furze House, our medical centre, our practice, that actually it was up to the people to initiate support, not to have it forced upon them. And so by April, after a lot of hard work by our county councillor, our South Cambridgeshire district councillors and the steering group, we got people making sure that everyone in their street was looked after. We also had communication using our communication routes, which is Hi Hub, Hi People, so our Facebook group, and we were making sure that they were confirming everything the steering group were doing. We developed a weekly digest so people were aware of what we were doing on the ground, and also aware of how we were interpreting the government guidelines, which was quite tricky. You know, people were seeing them very differently. So we also developed specialist services like the prescription service, so that people who were isolating, we could get the prescriptions for them. The street coordinators, supported by their street volunteer scheme, would deliver shopping to people who couldn't get out. And we also had the food pallets in the village, and the food pallets allowed our Salvation Army team, they led that initiative, to make sure that any of our particularly vulnerable residents were delivered food as they needed it. So looking after the most vulnerable, letting people initiate the support they needed. We had a switchboard that had the very accessible numbers as people needed them. And yeah, we supported the village. And once the initial formation of the steering group and the street coordinators was complete, it went very well. So yeah, it was an amazing time, and we still see the benefits of it now.
Wonderful. I think you've touched on some of this there, but I don't know whether there's any particular learning that you'd like to share from the experience.
Huge learning. First of all, you know, that putting in place a structure for the entire village was tricky, and we were told it was too big. Initially, they didn't think we could do it, but it was done. Secondly, support being initiated by the person, don't force it upon them, was important. Communicating offline was also very difficult. Getting communication round, the street coordinators helped with that. And also we did a special edition of our HISIM news, and we then did a second COVID article in our church magazine. So again, using the different teams, but that communication offline, you know, was difficult to do quickly. Making sure that everyone was comfortable with the guidelines. We did have people scared, you know, people concerned. And the fact that one of our farmers markets was operating brought a flurry of feedback that maybe it shouldn't be doing so, but we were able to make sure that that farmers market was as good as it could be in terms of social distancing. So, you know, we did win people over, but we had to make sure that we were doing the right thing. And then finally, supporting our local businesses. They'd always been used to working individually. So actually initiating that support was something we needed to do. But again, we're now working very closely with them, having formed that relationship. So forming relationships, I think, and making sure that we were empathetic to how people were feeling, you know, during the lockdown was probably the main things we needed to take into account.
Wonderful, thank you. And the final question I have is, if you had a crystal ball, how would you see the future there?
Oh gosh, so when this started, it appeared very quickly that there were opportunities that we hadn't seen before. At the moment, I see a huge appetite for engagement in the community that I hadn't seen before. So that continues. I see the businesses working together as I observe the HISIM traders WhatsApp group. I think the South Cambs, maybe what sums it up is the South Cambs District Council current poster of shop safe, stay safe, shop local, stay safe. I think, you know, people are working together in local groups very well. And as we look at the development that we see coming through, we've got a lot of development coming through in our area. People are wanting to get involved. So I'm optimistic. I see also that we have our street coordinators standing down but standing by. In fact, they're coming back online now because of the potential second wave. I see the future as challenging with this COVID pandemic, but with the collaboration of the community, and also to add, the church have been looking at talking futures, and we've been looking at our neighbourhood plan and how that can support our community. Yeah, I see it as rosy for people, you know, within local areas working together. So yeah, I feel we'll beat it, whatever is thrown at us.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Yvonne. That's superb. Thank you. Hello. So I think we should be back. A huge thank you to everybody that was interviewed for that film. I think it was lovely to see just so many great examples of the fantastic work that's been happening. I'm hoping that everybody can hear me again. Sorry, I'm relying on you on chat to then go, yes, I can hear you and see you. And this is the bit that gives us most nerves about the tech side of things. So here's where we invite over all of our panelists to come and do a question and answer session or discussion session. My colleagues are just busily making those people presenters so that they can join me on the screen. So they should be here anytime now. Something I'll mention in the meantime is that you will hopefully be able to see on your screen now, or if not shortly, a downloadable takeaway file, which is a Word document that just includes some of the information about things that were talked about during that film. So hopefully that will be useful for you. And it includes within there actually the information about the Cambridgeshire Directory, which is somewhere where you can upload information about your own organisation and the activities that you do. And that's a way to share. It's free to do, and it's an easy way to share information with the wider world. So please do download that document. If there's any issues with it within this screen, it's also in the resource centre, so you'll be able to access it. So I can see that colleagues are joining me as I speak. So I'm going to ask colleagues to just introduce themselves. Just basically, what's your name and where do you come from before we start? So Christine, could we start with?
Yes, I'm Christine Trevorrow and I am here from Support Cambridgeshire today.
Thank you, Christine. And Dennis?
Dennis Payne from Histon and Impington.
Thank you, Dennis. And it was your colleague Yvonne, wasn't it, who was actually on the film with us? So thank you for.
That's right. Yes.
That's brilliant. Sarah, you're also here for a colleague.
Yes, I am. I'm here for Lynette, so I'm pretending to be Lynette from Care Network.
Brilliant, lovely. Thank you, Sarah. And Anita, who's actually here with us, and you can explain both your hats, Anita.
Hi, yeah, so I'm Anita, I'm the South Cambs Place Coordinator, and also played a part in the Fordham COVID response. And just say we've got Shona should be joining us as well, but I think we just got a few tech issues with the video coming up. So I might look slightly distracted as I try and sort that out.
No problem. That's fine. Thanks, Anita. And we'll wait for Shona to join us when she's. I'll just introduce her ahead. In fact, you'll recognise her from the film. So Shona was actually featured on the film, and she is from Coveney. And is part of the Village Hall committee there. But like Anita, and I suppose that's the thing, is we all play many roles in life, don't we? But as well as being part of the Village Hall committee there, she also coordinates the community safety partnership in East Cambridgeshire with the district council. So there's a few of us here with many hats, of which I think actually Sarah possibly wins, because I know you've got several. So I was just having a quick look at this. What's been really interesting while we're just waiting for Shona is it's been less about questions in the chat box so far and much more about kind of reflections and sharing of ideas. There's been really rich ideas shared in the chat box, everything from kind of scarecrow trails to kind of on Zoom youth clubs, and all sorts of things. I just was slightly overwhelmed by the range of different things that have been happening, kind of workshops online, all this kind of thing. And so I think maybe we might just start by those that are here, just to share a couple of reflections of your thoughts and how I don't know, just having seen the film and you're having your own experience, just sharing a quick reflection. Dennis, I'm going to come to you first.
I'm just so impressed with what everybody has done. Obviously, we were talking about communities of different sizes with different demographics, but everybody has stepped up and really made a difference in their community and supported the more vulnerable, the shielding, and that's been great. And I think we've just got so much to learn from what everybody else has done, and that's really impressed me. And I've taken a whole stack of notes on that, I'll be challenging some of my colleagues with some of those questions and ideas from elsewhere.
Because the range of ideas and the amazing activity happening in your community has been phenomenal. So thank you. Christine, is there anything you'd like to just share, having watched the film?
Well, like Dennis, it's very impressive what everybody has been doing, and I'm quite jealous that I don't live in a village because there's so much that's been going on.
Thank you. One thing I'm just going to quickly flag in between times is just so that people note it in the chat box, is that a colleague of ours, Carl Suckling, has mentioned that he's actually meeting with the Ministry of Housing and local government in the near future, and he's included his email address in the chat box. If anybody has any comments that they want him to represent during that meeting, then please do take that opportunity. Sarah, can I come to you just with any kind of general reflection? I know you've been incredibly active with Care Network and otherwise during COVID. No, I don't think we've got your mic on, but we have to have that for bingo, don't we?
Well, we have to have that. Why have I not got my mic on?
You have now.
I have now. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you loud and clear.
It
yes.
seems to take a little bit of time to actually sort of connect everything. But anyway, with my Care Network hat on, suddenly all these groups were popping up and doing the things that Care Network out in the community had been doing. And we sort of sat back and thought, wow, this is absolutely amazing. So just for a while, we kind of had to rethink our role a bit. And find out, how we could actually best support the groups that were supporting the people on the ground. So that's sort of what we did there. With another hat on, I was one of those people on the ground because I was volunteering with the local Ely mutual aid group as well, who were doing the most amazing job supporting people in the city, because supporting people in the city is slightly different than doing it in the village. It's just that bigger challenge, really, and knowing how to dovetail in with all the other organisations who are doing a similar thing. So that was an interesting thing to be able to see from both sides, really. But the support that everybody has given to their neighbours, and interesting. I can't quite remember who it was who was saying that people who volunteer often want some help themselves. And I rather laughed because I was volunteering and needing lavatory paper at the time. And my neighbour very kindly stepped up for that one. So we all need help sometimes.
Lovely, thank you, Sarah. And I'll come to Anita now. Just to mention, actually, in the meantime, that unfortunately we're having technical problems with Shona. So whilst I'd love her to join us, unfortunately, I don't think we're quite going to manage to pull that off. So sorry about that, Shona. But Anita, if we could just have your general reflections, that would be lovely.
I think it was really interesting for me in a village that I was quite a newbie to our village, only having lived there for a couple of years. So obviously hadn't quite established myself as a true villager. But I was amazed at how much people offered up their skills and how as a village we came together to recognise where those skills lied and how to best use them. And that was really interesting. Nothing was off the table. Anything could work. And yeah, I think that was a really interesting part from my perspective.
Superb. Thank you, Anita. And we have had our first question come in. So thank you, Catherine. So the first question to all is, and please just raise your hand, panel, if you're keen to answer, is what have we not cracked? So there's lots of amazing work going on, but is there anything which the panel think we still need to work on? Whilst people are thinking, I'm going to just kind of briefly go first on that one. because one of the things that I'm hearing kind of in the place coordinator role in East Cams is that actually some communities are beginning to struggle a little bit more in terms of volunteers. So for some it's still completely fine, and others saying, oh, actually we have had a bit of a waning of volunteers for really good reasons, because people are back at work. Yeah, just that actually everybody, we haven't had any real issues. Everybody's saying actually as things stand at the moment, we've still got completely enough for the needs that we have, but people are just seeing that looming potential future lockdown and thinking, are we going to be okay or aren't we? Well, one of the ideas I liked is that what's come up here and came up earlier in the panel is that idea of perhaps committing the time that you would have been commuting if you're not anymore. Could we make a bit of a I don't know, a little bit of a campaign around that, and some flexible ways of using that time? I don't know. That's just a thought. But Dennis, I see you put your hand up.
As I think Yvonne said, we've lost some people from our volunteer team, but we've been able to fill those gaps fairly easily. And because we've actually got that team organised on a per road basis, per street, the load on each and the individual is not that great. And even those, we call them street coordinators because they may have volunteers supporting them as well. So we've partitioned that up, and I think we're okay at the moment. But the question was, what haven't we sorted? And I think we're really concerned about mental health across the whole age spectrum. And we have the village charity that Yvonne mentioned does some work on mental health, both for adults and also in some of our schools. And we've had a men's discussion group in our community orchard that meets of an evening with chairs and a thermos of coffee or a bottle of beer or something, and that's all great. But there's just this feeling that there's a bigger demand out there that we haven't got answers for, and we know that the NHS mental health services are severely challenged, and that's just a real concern.
Okay, thank you. And that's certainly one I've heard echoed. Thank you, Dennis. Sarah, would you like to comment?
Yes, mental health is a huge issue. And at Care Network, what we have tried to set up is the sort of next step that local people can either be referred into or refer themselves into the check and chat line and the wellbeing service, because it's finding that next level of support for people, really. A lot of communities have skills already in there who can support their residents who are struggling, but there is that additional offer as well. I want to share where I visited the other day, because it was just so wonderful. I've come away feeling quite settled and marvellous, in that one of my groups, called the Colour Wheel in Hardwick, is a group of people who Project Catalyst has helped to restart again. They set up about a year ago, quite an informal group doing mindful colouring. So absolutely beautiful, gentle colouring they sit and do. And we kept it going in somebody's garden through the summer, and then of course it's all getting a bit chilly and a bit more difficult. So with a small amount of money, I think it was around about £200 from Project Catalyst, it enabled them to hire St Mary's Cabin in Hardwick, which is the new hall, and to get enough crayons and resources and enough funding that people can have one whole table to themselves at a time, so they're socially distanced, with plenty of air coming through, and Wheatie bags if you get a bit cold. So they are there, and I visited them the other day to see how they were getting on. It was this lovely big picture window looking out towards the beautiful old trees, which have all the autumn colours, and it was calm and it was gentle, and everybody was saying what a difference it was making to them, that just for those couple of hours they had taken time out from all the stresses of life and were able, and they were a group that was supporting each other. So so I thought I'd just share that with you because it was wonderful.
Thank you, Sarah. That's lovely. And I think there's been sometimes the really simple ideas. This has come up through a few things that have actually worked incredibly well, haven't they? So yeah, I just love the fact that there's a huge range of activities and different ways that people have tailored things to their own communities. I think it's brilliant. There's a couple of comments on the back of this in the chat box regarding making volunteering more appealing than Netflix. I just what a brilliant way to put it. Thank you, Catherine and Shona on that. Do we have ideas for how we make volunteering more appealing than Netflix? What's the big motivation? Anita.
So I think it's quite interesting that with many people returning back to furlough, from furlough and not having quite so much time during the day, I think it is quite interesting to think about how community groups normally run, and they do normally run during the week and during the office hours in the very traditional sense of the way. I think there's a lot of untapped potential about doing some things in the evening and weekends. Now, some of it is going to be impractical, and I absolutely understand that. But some of the bits and pieces about helping your neighbours out are not limited to daytime weekdays. It's something that can be done in the evenings, particularly during the winter when the evenings become so long. I mean, in terms of getting that better than Netflix, well, I feel like I've got to the end of my Netflix tether. So maybe that's going to be an evolution as it is.
Good answer. Does anybody else want to come in on that? I struggle because I'm not on Netflix. I don't do Netflix. But I do volunteer. So I'm already won over. Christine.
Yeah, it's about being flexible, isn't it? And it's about meeting people about when they have their time, and they're just as Anita said, when they are available, rather than stipulating when we want people. And it obviously is difficult if you're servicing a particular beneficiary need and that has to happen in a particular time. But there are quite a lot of opportunities we could look at, and we could break down roles, make them more flexible, allow people to pick up certain elements of a role, make it differentiate. So that there are things that somebody could do in the evening on their computer, there are some things that someone else could do. I think we just have to think in those sort of more micro ways so that people can get more involved. And once they become involved, I think we've all found that with this situation, people who perhaps haven't been involved with volunteering before, they start and then they get more involved. They want to do more once they have a sort of taste for it, and they get the feedback and that volunteer high we all know about. But you have to give them a place to start that's not too daunting.
Brilliant, thank you. Sage advice there. We have another question here from Leanne. How can we get more young people involved in volunteering? There are fewer extracurricular activities available, so young people may have time to offer. Does anybody have either thoughts or examples on that you'd like to share? Oh, yeah. So, Sarah, we'll come to you first.
Okay, so with another hat on, I'm doing some work with Possibility, which is a local Ely charity, and we've gone digital, we've gone online. So exercises for people with neurological diseases are now going online instead. What I need is, and what I think I have recruited, is a young person to do some graphic design for us, because we know that just some of our clients are taking part in the online Zoom, real-time Zoom exercise classes, but that leaves a big amount that aren't. So we need to get some resources out to them, some exercise sheets. And I was thinking, so who is going to be good at this? And so the word went around, and a young person has volunteered, who's been doing a graphic design course at West Suffolk College, has offered her time. And those sort of things can go on people's CVs, which will just make the difference between them getting a job and not, getting a reference and not, just to say that they have been doing something else in the community to share their skills and to support other people. So just kind of think what your organisation, your charity, your group needs, what volunteering opportunities there can be, because it can be right out of the box sometimes.
Brilliant. Thank you. Yes, yeah, that flexibility is key, isn't it? And sorry, it had to happen, didn't it? My cat then wanders across the screen. Oh, and I think she's going to be back any second. She wants to be famous. But coming over to you, Anita.
So what was quite interesting in Fordham was that the question was asked to the young people as they were volunteering. So they were passing by and volunteering just like a lot of people in the community were. And we started asking them what they were interested in, really. And it started off with delivering leaflets and getting the postcards through the door. You know, the postcards we're all very familiar with. But what it involved with was marrying that up with some of the needs within the village, particularly around the community newspaper round. So the younger people were absolutely loving the opportunity to have a paper round, something that's not actually available in our particular area for a number of reasons. So, you know, they would bomb around on their bikes, they'd deliver all the newspapers, they'd get to know some of the older residents of the village, some of those that were shielding. But what I think really is the key point is we didn't assume we knew what was going to be right for getting younger people involved. We actually asked the question, and I know that, you know, from time to time we can forget that as an angle. I actually asked the question.
Brilliant. Yes, thank you. And I'm sorry. Yeah, as predicted. This is Luna, everybody. Luna wanted to join us. And yeah, yes, sorry for the distraction. So picking up the chat thread, Leanne came back with, I wonder if schools could be more involved with promoting volunteering roles while their extracurricular offer is limited. Would be so good to see interactive activities that are offline. Community paper fits that bill. And just to add to that, so whilst you're thinking, if you've got any more reflections, CAM's youth panel were instrumental, says Shona, in applying for funding to ensure that young people have electronic devices to work on while not in school. East CAM's community safety partnership have funded 45, which went to families. And then one more question, and actually on the same topic from Catherine Shepherdson, is whether we know how many do Duke of Edinburgh. I must admit, I don't know the answer to that. But is there, before my cat completely takes over the show, is there any further reflections that people would like to share on that question? I don't think we'll take any further questions because we've only got a few minutes left before we close. Christine, sorry.
Oh, well, I was just going to say the Duke of Edinburgh Award. I mean, we regularly get contact from young people looking for opportunities, and the National Citizenship Scheme, which I think Carl mentioned in the chat, that's been very effective. I don't know how many, I mean, I think it's got slightly, there's been talk about it being involved with the Journey Makers scheme the government have launched as well. So there's various things going on with that, but I think it's all opportunities for young people to get involved. I think the key point that Anita made is that they need to be consulted and asked, and we shouldn't make assumptions about what they want. So it's about being flexible again, isn't it? It's that word. It's actually so easy to say and so hard to do.
Yes, so true. But also, I think what we're seeing is lots of really good examples of people doing it. And my goodness, we're all being tested. But I think our communities are just coming out shining from all of this in having those conversations. I was commenting earlier, one of the things that's really struck me today is about how human a lot of the things that have come up. It's all about kind of building really strong relationships. And I think, as Adrian was saying earlier, whilst there's lots of negatives to this pandemic, actually there has also been a really strong kind of community spirit and connections that have arisen through it, and some fantastic collaboration. And I think we've seen that here in this session as well. So just to close, I wanted to just thank you all as a panel for joining us and sharing your experience, which has been really helpful, and to everybody for engaging in the chat as well, because there's some wonderful comments and just really good exchanging of experiences there, which is helpful. One thing I was just going to mention is I did a few minutes ago, I popped in oh, did I? Can you say it? Yes. I popped in a link for a Jamboard. I don't know whether anybody's ever seen a Jamboard before. We're not going to have time to do this together now, but if you click on that link, then you'll come up with just a simple exercise where you can add online some some what are they called? Post-it notes with your ideas around kind of 2 simple exercises that are there. It's absolutely not essential to do it, but if you have time, it's something that would be really useful for us, just as a way of collecting ideas and experience that you've had as communities. And that's something that will be available through the next 30 days as well for those that are joining this after the actual event. So we'll then take a nice screenshot of that at the end to see about all the ideas that have been collated. So that brings us to 3:28, 3:29. I think we've done well at coming in on time. Thank you to everybody. We didn't go as adventurous as to sharing the poll in the end, only because we didn't quite know what was going to happen. So if we can, we'll make that available in the resources at the end as well. But thank you for your patience, and thank you for joining us and contributing so well to this. And huge thank you to both Agnes and Anita for making the tech work. You have all my admiration, and Anita for even answering questions at the same time. So thank you all. Here's to volunteers and continuing to giving time to communities for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.